Okay, we should be live. Hello again, everyone. You are live with myself, Balloons, and Daniel. We have a special guest with us today who we'll introduce in just a moment. But thank you again for joining in to another Community Team Live Q&A. Daniel's got some announcements to cover, and then he'll introduce our lovely guest. And just remember, if you have questions at any point, you can get your questions in now, and that way we'll get to them right at the beginning of the broadcast. Just remember to prefix your question with question in all caps, and that'll let us see it and get it highlighted, and we'll get you added to the list. So without further ado, the illustrious Daniel Holbach.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, for those of you who are new to this, if you're watching this through ubuntuonair.com, below the video feed there's this chat widget. Just enter your favorite nickname, hit the connect button, and then you can join the conversation and, as Nick said, ask questions, and if you have new ideas of stuff we should do and whatever it is, keep it coming. Right, yeah, I had some quick announcements. The first one is that we decided and announced the dates of the next Ubuntu Online Summit. That's going to be the 3rd through the 5th of November. And for those of you who are new, Online Summit is usually where we come up with plans for the next Ubuntu release. So expect a lot of discussions in Google Hangouts where we discuss new features, stuff that needs to be fixed, where we assign work items to people who are not present. It's usually a lot of fun. So make sure you're there. And if you want to get involved, that's usually a good way of finding out what's happening, who's doing what, and get introduced to all the people who are working on it. The second thing is General Electric just announced a contest. It's all about the Internet of Things, snappy. It's just read it on insights.ubuntu.com, and I think you have 3 weeks to get involved there. And that's all the announcements I had. Just one more quick thing. Jose wants us to mention that you have to circle and friend and subscribe to all the Ubuntu on Air accounts you can find. That way you learn about new shows and upcoming shows and can watch old shows as well. And that's it. Nick, you also had a quick thing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for reminding us. FOSSETCON is coming up. So for those of you who are in Florida or want to be in Florida, November is a lovely time of year to be here, and so you won't be missing out if you come on down. But FOSSETCON is a lovely free and open source software conference, and if you check out Michael's blog at mhall119.com, I think one of his latest posts talks a bit more about what all is going on there. But essentially, there'll be a sort of little mini UbiCon on the first day, just before FOSSETCON, and Mike will be there, and the Florida local guys will be there as well. So if you're interested and in the area and want to come on by and check it out, it'll be awesome. I'm sure there'll be some great demos. Mike has some interesting hardware, and I'll probably send some hardware along as well. So there'll be plenty of tablets and phones to play with, lots of new Convergence stuff to check out. And yeah, if you haven't seen or played with the Ubuntu phone live in person, that's definitely your chance. And it's definitely your chance to sort of meet up and hang out with lots of people who also happen to like Ubuntu. So give it a check, give it a thought, and try and check it out and attend. I think the actual dates are November, I want to say 19th. Aha, 19th through the 21st. I was correct. Excellent. So brilliant. Yeah, give it a check.
It's really nice to see more and more UbuCons coming up. These are mostly events organized by community members, sometimes co-located with other events. Also, roughly around the same time, I think it's the weekend after, is the UbuCon DE in Germany, in Berlin. So if you check out ubucon.de, you can find out what the actual dates are, and yeah, come to Berlin. Right, with that all out of the way, we're joined by Pat McGowan. How are you doing?
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Cool. Yeah, Pat, I think your job title is Director of Apps and Tools, no, Tools and Applications,
Yeah,
but it feels like you're doing much more than tools and applications, right?
yeah, I do. I kind of have a dual role there. So I have some development teams that work in those areas with the SDK and the apps and other parts of the system. But then I also work a lot with the product management team and do a lot of project oversight, um, making sure all the right bugs get into the updates and the right feature sets are prioritized and put in backlogs by the various teams. So I kind of do a little of that as well. So that's why you see me kind of all over the place.
You basically where all the interesting stuff happens. In the last time it was mostly the phone, but with more and more phone things overlapping into the desktop and into the future of everything. Um, I'm sure that's quite a lot to manage, right?
Yeah, of course we have lots of good people doing that, for us. So it's just really just the teams do so well to take care of the task lists and prioritize things correctly that it's really just very easy to. It just runs really well, in my opinion. The teams function at a very high level.
Yeah, you're very more modest. But it, if you look at a typical day of yours, is it mostly the phone, or is it hard to say it's just
Yeah,
the phone? Or
yeah, it's very much mostly the phone. That's where all the focus is. We've got some interesting stuff you've referenced, like the convergence work that we're doing to bring in the desktop capability, uh, which is a focal point right now. But yeah, I spend most of my days just worrying about the phone, making sure the releases are getting done, and we're progressing all the software.
and that's mostly working with the engineering teams, or are you also talking to our partners and figuring out what they want or what their customers want?
So I don't talk very much directly to the customers, only on occasion. We have another team that's more on the commercial side that's run by Victor Palau, and they do the bulk of the interaction with the customers. We have teams over in Asia as well that help with that. So, but I work very closely with all those people. So I'm talking to them all the time, and there's a lot of back and forth and synergy between their team and the engineering, Ubuntu engineering proper. But which is now we're really all one big team now. So recently, we all got organized together, but we were already working very closely. And then I also talked to the product managers and some of the salespeople. But again, they really do the direct customer interaction.
Do you feel the recent change in Canonical that changed a lot? Does it feel like everything is much closer now?
I think it's just more reflective of how we were working anyway,
Mm.
because the teams just generally did work well, and now it's just a little bit more official that we're all kind of under one umbrella. So for me, I think it was just a gradual transition, and that just made more sense.
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, I was kind of hoping there were new like prototypes of devices and stuff lying around, and we would get a glimpse of what's happening. Um, w- what are the new things that teams are working on right now? What I'm sure people are going to be very excited about what's coming on the phone. And is there anything you can share?
Well, I can tell you, I can talk about where we're focusing, which I already mentioned the convergence work and what we're calling Pocket Desktop.
Cool.
That's something for the first half of next year, but we're doing a lot of that work now in preparation. So I think Kevin Gunn was here recently, and he probably talked a lot about the work his team is doing to make all that possible. So we're doing work all over the stack and in the toolkit, in the apps, in Mir, and the compositor. So all of that's been coming together for a long time because that's always been the vision, right? It's been the vision of Unity. and now we're starting to see the results. So we look forward to having real products in the market with that capability, and I think that's probably the next big exciting thing that we're all pushing toward. Other than that, we're always looking to try to expand into new markets. So the sales guys are out there getting new customers, and our existing customers, BQ and Meizu, are expanding where they're selling into. So those drive a lot of the requirements that we get. So we have to be certified in some new country or add some, new kind of capability like LTE or something like that, and that drives our requirements.
And how did the process for the Converge device, how did that work? Was it mostly just somebody looking at the phone, let's say the Nexus 4, and then plugged it in and saw what worked and what didn't, or how did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of work by the teams. It's somewhat that, yeah. I mean, we add the capabilities, and then we're testing it on both the Nexus 4 and the Nexus 7 right now, and yeah, just putting triggers in it to enable it to turn on the mouse and go into windowed mode and just kind of magically transform based on the form factor. So a lot of that is working in the lab, and we're trying very much to get it out so people can start playing with it themselves. But again, I mean, it's in terms of real product delivery, it's a little ways out, but not too far. It's on the horizon.
Maybe you could also explain which teams are working on it, just to give people an idea of how many folks are involved and what they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of alluded to that. It goes throughout the stack. I mean, first the SDK, the UI toolkit had to change in order to support the dynamic layouts and other new components. The apps had to take advantage of that. So they've been the design. Our UI design team has been coming up with the proper user experience for how that looks on a big screen, and how it lays out, how many columns, what do you do to take advantage of the extra screen real estate, and then the toolkit and apps have implemented all that. And then the base part of the stack with Mirror and the compositor, that has to support the proper window management. And with window management comes a lot of changes from the phone, obviously, because you're not just showing one surface at a time anymore. You have to manage multiple surfaces. So pretty much everybody in engineering is working on some aspect of it, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, we have the first few questions coming in. We had a question from Gamileon. He asked, what's the release date for 1+2 with Ubuntu? I've no idea. And somebody said that a community member, Mario Grip, is working on this. Do you have any insights what's happening there? Or Nick, do you know anything?
Yeah, this is something that Michael mentioned that Mario's doing. I did see the announcement on the 1+1 forums, I think it was, that I was reading. So I want to say he either helped or potentially did the original porting work as well. I'm not quite sure, but that's the place to do it. It's not something that we're necessarily working on, although it is always cool and interesting to see new devices being supported, and some of that porting going on. I know, Daniel, you did some work. Maybe it's been a little while now when the porting guide's been updated a few times, but I think most recently you and perhaps David Calais both did some work on it. Ah, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Pat because I wasn't sure if I had missed an announcement or something.
No. Nothing that official. It can happen, but yeah, not in this case.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So next question is from Aquarius, and he says, when developing for a Ubuntu phone, should I be able to, in general, run it on my desktop to test it? This is a very useful property. It makes testing and development much quicker, but doesn't always work. So he's asking you, Pat, if you can talk about whether this should always work or if it's not always going to be able to work. And that is basically to be able to test phone apps on the desktop.
Right. So yeah, and I think Stuart probably knows. I mean, our approach there has been mostly to try to keep the emulator functioning well, and have that as the way to always enable testing on a desktop. Because in that way you should get the majority of the APIs that are interesting, so that you can do proper testing. In reality, though, a lot of apps, depending on what they take advantage of, can run perfectly well on the desktop. Like the gallery and the music player and a lot of the ones that we write, they all work perfectly well. Some other apps that are going to take advantage of the specific phone hardware obviously are going to need a device or an emulator.
And Pat, do you think this is something that will be more enabled under Unity 8 on the desktop versus something running under Unity 7? Will there be a difference between those two?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think obviously it'll become more, with the convergence, it'll become more fully supported. There should be more interesting things that you'll see in terms of consistency across all the devices when we have Unity 8 everywhere.
Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Stuart. The next question is, are there any updates on the Convergent BQ phone? I think there's a lot of folks who are waiting and hoping for this new hardware.
That's an understatement.
So there's nothing official I can say. I was just saying earlier, though, that we do want to have a product in the market next year. So those are the kind of time frames we're probably talking about.
And maybe for those of you who haven't seen it yet, there was a video, I can't remember which YouTube channel it was on. It was one of the Ubuntu YouTube channels which showed an update of what's already happening on developer devices.
Yeah.
So if you want to find out what's already working and how well it's working.
Yeah, the desktop team and the Mirror team have made some really nice videos showing what's going on right now.
Indeed. Okay, so the next question is a bit about syncing and messaging frameworks. And they said, we've heard a lot about upcoming messaging frameworks and syncing frameworks. So they asked, can you tell us what is to be expected and when are they going to become available for developers?
Yeah, so those are a continuing effort long term. I think it's going to be more over the next year. You'll see those become more mature. We're really just building out on top of a lot of the building blocks we already have, like taking advantage of telepathy, and we've been using Sync Evolution for a lot of the support, and now we're starting to move to Buteo to replace that because I think we'll get some better integration points with that. So we're both changing out and enhancing the building blocks, and then adding some more formalized API layers on top of that. We've been doing some work with RCS, which again is kind of a long-term big project, but that's also kind of the first example of taking advantage of the new framework.
So I know this because this comes up a lot, but a lot of folks want to sort of run their own services. So is this something that would make it easy for app developers to sort of have their own self-hosted, messaging or otherwise syncing, have their own cloud, if you will?
Well, I mean, you can do. So it doesn't help. It's not. Yeah, I guess it does help. So that's the short answer. It's not so much that they'll be able to implement a background service, because that's not our philosophy, but there will be an environment to plug into that's a little more enhanced, and they can do some of that today already, but it should get better over time. Yeah, it should be more fully implemented.
Okay. Another question for you, Pat. They ask, what is your daily driver phone?
Who asked that one? I have a Meizu MX4 right now, which I like very much. I like the. I have been using the Nexus 4 for probably a year and a half or two, and I appreciate the larger screen size, and it's a little bit quicker. But I've tried them all. I've kind of rotated through with the BQ and the Nexus, and now the Meizu.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right, next question. They say, in the demos, you see a small representation of the big screen on the phone screen. Will that change? Will we be able to use the on-screen keyboard or use our phone as a touchpad? So I think they're talking about some of those convergent videos where we're plugging in a mouse or a keyboard onto the phone itself.
Yeah, so I think the question too is, what do we do with the phone screen when you've got it plugged in?
Right.
There are some interesting things you've played around with there. In the initial implementation, there's just going to, I think that what we'll settle on is just having some sort of dedicated app running that may be of interest. It would be nice to have a touch keyboard and touch screen capability there. We played around with something similar when we did the Ubuntu for Android solution a couple of years ago. But I think to start out, it's going to be pretty simple. It'll just be some sort of app that's running there.
All right. The next question is one we'll never tire of hearing. And they're asking, they said, here in Italy, we are very WhatsApp dependent. So they want to know if there's any possible hint of release for WhatsApp on Ubuntu.
Yeah, and so the standard answer there is it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? So they're not interested in supporting the platform until we have a significant enough user base, and you know, users want WhatsApp, so it goes back and forth. But I think once we get enough volume and once we can start working with some of the larger providers, that'll probably be enough to convince them to bring the app over and some other third-party apps as well.
Yeah, and slightly related to that, I saw that very alpha version of Text Secure went into the store. I mean, it's not ready yet, and it's not WhatsApp, but it's also a question we received a number of times, and I just saw it come up in the store yesterday or the day before. So you might be interested in that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, we're always, for those who are willing and able to try other platforms and services, there's definitely no shortage on Ubuntu Phone for messaging frameworks or services. So give it a try if you can. The next question is talking about app payment. So is there any plans for in-app payment? And they mention wanting Bitcoin or even virtual money, Ubu coins. That's an interesting idea. But in-app payments.
Yeah, so we're working on in-app payments as we speak. You may have seen, so we're using the Qt purchasing API, and we're integrating a backend to that, and it's very close to being able to be released. I think first what you'll see, as soon as the next update is done, I think then we'll enable the in-app payment stuff for developers to start trying out. And then the subsequent update, it'll become an official part of the API set. But yeah, it's very close to working. And then it's a question of what backends are going to be supported, and I have a little less information on that. But we work closely with the Qt company guys, and they recently open sourced the Qt purchasing stuff, and that was partly due to our working with them on it and doing our integration for Ubuntu.
Huh. Do you happen to know when we'll see that, or have I missed it? Is it already out?
Yeah, they announced
Qt
it
itself.
about a month ago, I think, that they open sourced that part of it, because it used to be part of just their enterprise offering, and now it's available.
Awesome, cool. The next question asks, will the phone layout be able to double as a big picture mode for TVs and large displays?
Not sure. Maybe we can get a clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Big picture mode. they talking? I'm not sure actually. Guess we can follow up with it.
I mean, when you play video on the big, it will go full screen. I mean, the video player will work the way you would expect it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure on the question. We'll clarify that. Next question is from Michael. He asks, what's the biggest surprise for you in the past 2 years of phone development? And a follow-up is, what's been the biggest disappointment?
Yes, hard ones. I don't know if so the biggest surprise. I guess I don't know if I want to say I was surprised, but the project went really well, and we got the phone out to market quickly. I felt really good about that. I think I might have been a bit surprised at how successful we were and how fast we were able to bring it together. I think the team did a great job to go from start to fully working phone. And that first phone call was really pretty exciting. We were at a sprint in London, and it was just great to have that first call go through. And then he asked biggest disappointment. I don't know if I have any big disappointments. I guess the only one would be it would have been nice to release some more products in the last year and maybe have a tablet or something, but we can only do so much.
Yeah, regarding more devices, how do you feel we kept up with various devices, keeping an eye on different bug reports, delivering software or updates to all of them? Was that a big issue, or was it also something that just happened naturally and we were set up for it the right way?
So it was very deliberate that that's our intention is to not fragment and have different software on different devices. And we only have a few devices, admittedly, in the field, but they are all running the same version of the software, with only differing in the hardware aspects of it or other customizations. So yeah, and I think that the cadence of updates has been really strong. We're kind of settled on a 6-week cadence right now, and we've been able to maintain that for several iterations, and it's working very well, I think. And I see a lot of good feedback from people using the phones that like how great that that problem got fixed, or they added this new capability. So that's the intention, is to keep that going as long as we can.
So adding new devices should be too much of an issue as you see it right now?
No, the guys who do the enablement, they do, they can bring up a phone in pretty short order. We've dealt with numerous chipsets, different radios, so yeah, the guys know how to do that pretty well. So it doesn't take us long to bring up a new device. And even in the community, we see people doing it themselves. So it just speaks to how nicely the system comes together and how easy it is to port.
Brilliant. All right. A question from Pavak Paul. There was something called Ubuntu Brainstorm. It's been discontinued. Any alternative way that we can place our idea for Ubuntu? Wow, Ubuntu Brainstorm was ages and ages ago. Basically, the idea was that people could say, I have this idea for Ubuntu, this is something you should look into, and then people could jump in and make a blueprint out of it or whatever. Where do you think we get most of the feedback for the phone and devices in general nowadays? Is it the phone mailing list, or is it conversations with the partners and customers, or?
Yeah, well, both. Yeah, so we get a lot on the mailing list and just bug reports for people who know how to do that for us, and then we do talk to the support teams at the manufacturers. So that'll help us prioritize things that they're seeing. But for the most part, the feedback does come from the community. It's not coming through, say, BQ as much. That's more they sometimes highlight a certain capability that their users are asking for us, and that's good. But a lot of it, yeah, comes from the mailing list.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ubuntu Brainstorm, one issue was, just to give others a bit of background, one of the issues was that we got loads and loads of feedback, and it always required somebody to go through the huge list and maybe pick a few or answer to them, and it just proved to be loads and loads of work because we also had duplicate ideas and all the rest of it. But I also had the feeling, as just what Pat said, that the feedback loop is pretty tight. We have people who are interested in bringing, let's say, a new app on their need, I don't know, a new component or something, and they get in touch with the SDK folks or with other folks, and they work pretty closely. Also, people working on the core apps. It's not just canonical folks, but also people who work in the wider community, and that works quite well. Even do sprints together, work together with the design team, and so on. So I would say just try the mailing list and get in touch with people on ISC. Okay. Question. Mari Grip asks, are there any plans on upgrading the Android base to 5.1.x?
There are. Yeah. So there's also work happening for the new 5. Version of Android. Naturally, I mean, as we take advantage of the hardware layers there, we'll have to keep pace. And what happens is the device manufacturers will switch, and if they're deploying Android, they'll pick a version of Android, and so we'll keep pace with that. So yes, we're working on Android 5.
You maybe explain which bits of Android we still use, and if we have plans to change any of that, or if that's just fine. What's still Android in the Ubuntu phone?
Yeah, so it's the kernel, which we may change configuration of, but the kernel and the HAL, so the hardware access layer, and the drivers. So pretty much all the things that talk to devices, chips, components on the hardware. So that lowest layer, and in some cases we might use a service just slightly above that, like for camera is a good example, where we'll use some software from Android for that, or for the modems for the radios. Everything else is Ubuntu, so it's kind of like a 95%, 5%, I think, in terms of code.
Okay. We just got a follow-up to the question about the TVs and large displays. NDG said, big picture mode, like in Steam, is so you can use a TV from a normal TV viewing distance. Would you be able to keep the phone UI layout when plugged into a TV, so you can, for instance, read stuff from the couch?
So I think I know what he's asking. And you know what we do with the phone screen when plugged in is still kind of being worked through in terms of what use cases people are going to want to have there. So I think that's, I don't know the answer. I don't know a good answer to that, where it'll end up. I think it's going to start simple, like I was saying, and then as we figure out the use cases people want, you know, we can enhance it so that you kind of have a second screen, you know, capability there.
Gamaleon asked, how long is Ubuntu supported on phones and how often is it updated? Android phone makers usually have really bad software support, resulting in insecure phones and fragmentation.
So I missed the first part of the question.
How long is Ubuntu supported on phones and how often is it updated?
Okay, so I guess we have. So the intention is to have it be supported on the order of years, not super long term, like like other vendors like Fairview, I think, have intentions of, but several years. But the thing that will be certainly much better is as you've seen, we're updating very frequently and to all devices. So that's the goal, right? To keep that and to avoid the fragmentation. So like I was saying, we got an update coming out every 6 weeks for every device that's shipping, and the reference designs too. So the intention is to keep that up, and to support hardware in the field for as long as we can. But I think the expectation should be it's probably not as long as 5 years, but you get to see because we haven't been out there for long enough.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here's also a follow-up question to something we talked about earlier. Gamaliel asked, what is your idea of a pure Ubuntu phone without the Android bits, latest kernel, open hardware, etc.?
So that requires, the barrier there is that it requires all the component vendors to provide implementations of drivers that will work natively for Linux. And that can happen if if we gain enough market share, we could start to see more native implementations there. But I don't know how much, to me, I don't know if it makes much difference as long as the things are well supported. But the barrier is just if there's always going to be Android and there's going to be Ubuntu, the component vendors don't want to implement twice. So I think we're not likely to see any real movement that way because they won't be motivated to do it. But there could be cases where it's done.
Okay. Aquarius also posted a follow-up question. A follow-up to explain what I was really asking for. If I test my phone app on the desktop, assume that the app doesn't use phone-specific hardware, and that doesn't work because the components aren't in Wiley or are in older versions than are on the phone, is that a bug in the SDK because it should work, or is that just tough because testing on the desktop is not a target and it works, and if it works, it's just lucky?
Right. So that's a real issue, and depending on so your target framework and API level that you have is not necessarily going to match your desktop. That should get better over time as things converge, but yeah, it really needs some virtualization to help with that. The SDK guys are thinking of ways to do more advanced encapsulation, but it remains an issue. I don't think I have a quick answer for him.
So Pat, what about if we assume the frameworks are the same? What about things like missing hardware bits? So if my phone's running Wiley and I'm running Wiley, but obviously my desktop doesn't have a GPS, are we going to do things to support that on the desktop?
No, I think that part of the API just won't be available. That's why I was saying you really need some kind of emulation. So if you're running in the emulator instance, then you could get that, or you might get a simulated something support for that. But it's difficult to do if you don't have the hardware.
Okay, so we shouldn't necessarily expect feature API parity between devices.
No, so the API will be there, but it won't have any device to talk to. So that's the way it is today.
Okay, let's keep going. I hope that helps, Aquarius. It's an interesting conversation. It's something that I find interesting anyway, since it has to do with testing. And I think Pat's been kind of correct in to say that you can never realistically guarantee 100%, but I definitely think it is useful. So it's something that we'd want to support where we can, when we can, and when it makes sense. All right, so DragonBite asks, any idea on the number of people who purchase Ubuntu phones, or how many users are developing for the phone? So I think he's asking for a little bit about how big the community is, who's using it, who's developing for it.
Yeah. Now, as far as developers, you guys may have a better count from the number that have submitted to the store. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it was. I don't know. I don't want to quote that. So there's 7,000 apps in the store, and I think there was almost 1,000 contributors. But on that, but there's probably more developers out there that aren't necessarily going to the store. As far as the units sold, I don't know those numbers, and the sales guys aren't telling me. They said they'd have to kill me or something if they told me. But I guess it's not millions of users yet. It's on the order of thousands, tens of thousands, but I don't know the exact numbers, and no one, they're not public either. So
Fair enough.
Okay. Indeed. Gamelon asks, will the Convergent phone be able to run Inkscape and other desktop apps?
yeah, so initially the plan is to have a specific set of apps that we'll provide with the image, and there'll be about 6 or 8 specific apps, and then over time we'll expand that to allow other legacy apps to be installed by the users. So yes, theoretically something like Inkscape can come, but it probably won't be in the first iteration.
Right, and so Dragonbyte's follow-up to that is then he's asking if they have to be, if applications like Inkscape and GIMP have to actually be revamped or reworked at all in order to actually run.
They don't have to be reworked. They just have to be properly installed in the rooted environment that we're going to provide for the apps to live in.
Awesome.
Just to start, we won't open that up to install any app until we get some experience with it.
Okay. Gamelon asks, what's the minimum limit for paid apps in the store? And then he's asking also, why is it not 99 cents?
I don't
I
think
think the limit is $2.99. Am I right?
I don't know.
Or is it $1.99?
It's something like that.
Probably has to do with the cost of accepting the payment. And I would have to ask somebody like Martin about that and see if there's other providers, payment providers that are planning to work with that would allow us to lower that.
Right. I believe that's my understanding as well. I think the limit is there because that's what's reasonable for processing and making sure everyone gets something, essentially.
But maybe we should invite Martin for one of the next shows. I'm going to take a note.
I think that's the answer. Is we'll get Martin's official word on that. And you can ask all of your store questions because I'm sure there's a ton of them. We'll bring Martin on a following episode. Gamelon asked another interesting question. He says, "Is now the right time to crowdfund a Ubuntu tablet?"
Interesting question. It's pretty soon. Pretty soon it might be the right time. I'd like to see one.
All right.
You may want to wait till we have a commercial partner and you see the first product come out, and then maybe then somebody would want to crowdfund their dream version of the tablet.
That does make sense. That way, you're crowdfunding. You don't end up as a Kickstarter story, a failed Kickstarter story, right? You want to let someone do the technical lifting first.
Right. Let's get all the pieces in place, and then it should be easier to do.
Mario Group asks, what are the plans to break the endless loop where users need apps, but app developers need users, aka the chicken and egg problem you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, so I guess the obvious answer is we have to get a bigger market share, and to do that we will start working with bigger partners that have that market leverage. So when we launch with a large carrier, for example, that could be enough. They would have the leverage with the app vendors to say, we're coming out with this product, we're going to sell X million of units, and we would like to have WhatsApp or whatever. And my understanding is that's how it's going to break the loop.
Interesting. And that's definitely something that is possible. Obviously, whenever it's meaningful enough for them to support, they'll do it, and that could come in a variety of ways, as you mentioned.
And you know, and to follow up on that, I mean, the approach that's been taken so far is we've purposely partnered with the folks we have, and started with a certain market of mainly enthusiasts. Then we can look at this next step, which would be a big carrier and a lot more consumers. So it'll happen. It's going to take some time.
That's fair enough. Next question is from Ubuntu user, and he says, "I'm using Ubuntu since March, and he likes it, which is awesome. I'm glad you like it. But he's asking about changing the background on the phone."
So, yeah, I don't have an answer for him if that's going to change. We had that for a while, early days, and then it went away for some UI consistency reasons. I think I'll have to check with the design guys, but the way scopes will be working in the future, and therefore that background is going to be different. So that may provide some opportunities for that to come, but I would have to check on it.
Yes, I miss my wallpaper. I think I had Gandalf for the longest time. That was the image search. And I was testing something in the browser. I think, oh yeah, right. Set as background from the browser, which was really cool.
Right.
Yep. All right. Mario Grip asked another question. He's asking about Android HAL, and he's wondering why we moved from CyanogenMod to ASOP.
Good question. I don't think I remember the answer to that. It probably had to do with the devices we wanted to support at the time. I don't have a good answer. I know there was a very specific reason why that happened, and maybe we can get back to him. I can ask the enablement guys.
Okay. How much have we migrated to ASOP versus? I know originally it was a CyanogenMod sort of base.
Yeah, I think all the images come from ASOP now.
Okay, so we're consistent in so much as it's all the same.
Yeah.
All from the same place. Cool. NDG asked a question. He says, when using a TV as a display, will it always switch to desktop mode automatically, or can you choose to use the phone UI on the TV screen?
I don't see that option right now, but again, you know, if there are use cases for it, we could consider it. I don't know. So right now, no, that's not defined as an option.
Right. I think his concerns are mostly around UI scaling. So in readability. So if you have a TV, if you have a TV really far away, I think there's some concern about you'd want a smaller scaling than what might be available to you.
Yeah.
All right. Dragonbite asks, there's been work on running Android apps in Ubuntu, and he's wondering how this would work, or would it work with the Ubuntu phone and potentially bridge the app gap.
Yeah, so that's one that we've kicked around over the last 2 years quite a bit. We've done some investigation there, and it turns out it's pretty difficult to do well. And I'd be interested to know what people's experience have been in other environments that are trying to do that. But I know it's a bit hard to get all apps working properly. I mean, we have a very different lifecycle model. We have a very different UI user experience, and so bringing something in, it would work in a very foreign way, and we would have to have a very heavyweight Android framework there in order to support those. So while it's theoretically possible, in practice it's quite expensive to create that and to maintain it. And I think one of the drawbacks of doing that would be that it would it wouldn't bring us a lot of more nice Ubuntu apps. And if people could say, well, I'll just write it for Android and then it'll work good enough for Ubuntu, that's not really the experience we want. We want a really great native experience. So far we've chosen to not do that. Now, if some, again, if some big partner wanted to get that and help us with it, maybe we would do it. But so far we've opted not to.
Yeah, I think it's to me it's a lot like what gaming on Linux has sort of gone through, and now you've seen people like native ports, rather than using something like Wine or some virtualization solution for a long time, and they realized that native ports are actually really nice, and that they'd prefer to almost have a native port or not have it at all. And
Right.
so instead, you've seen now the native ports are more and more available. The work that people have done over the years to sort of make it a possibility on Linux now means that you are seeing native ports. So I think that's along the same lines of what we're trying to do here. I'd rather see good native ports of apps to Ubuntu as opposed to
Exactly.
quasi solutions.
Right. We'd rather solve the other problem we alluded to earlier, where we get enough volume that it's no longer an issue, and we're just a target.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, we're almost out of questions. Now's your chance to get your last questions or feedback if you have any to get it in. One thing I would be interested to hear is what's the number one thing where you would like to get community folks involved? Like if somebody is really excited about the phone, and they want to get involved somehow, what do you
Well,
think they could do?
yeah, and you probably could answer your own question better than me, but
I'm interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, where I see it being very helpful today is what we gain from all the feedback from people really using it full time in various environments, and that helps us a lot to improve the quality and robustness. Because I think that's like, while it's interesting to get new features, I mean, the one thing I worry about most is that the quality level is really high and where it needs to be, and you get it much more rock solid and working in all the environments we want to be working in. And then with that as a good base, then we can kind of move forward and add all these cool, convergence things and all the other things. And we will do them all at the same time. But that to me is, if they could help on the robustness story, that would be the biggest one for me.
You've seen a lot of contributions there.
Well, certainly in terms of reports and feedback, and like we were talking about earlier. So that's super helpful, and even to the extent of people doing a lot of the analysis for us. That's digging into the logs and even looking at code. I mean, it's amazing when people can do that. Really helpful.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would have mentioned a couple of other things as well. Testing, obviously, or debugging and working on code. The brilliant thing about Ubuntu is that it is open source, and that you can take a look at the source and get involved easily, talk to people. So that's brilliant.
We have people, making merge proposals all the time, and it's just super helpful. And we're trying to do, the other thing is, we're trying to do a better job of paying attention to those things too, and addressing, if somebody goes to that extent to actually make a merge with a fix or enhancement. We're not always best at being in a timely way, getting that addressed, but we want to do a better job there.
Cool. That's really good to hear. And then there's the app gap, obviously. If you want to write apps, also all the feedback you have, it's much appreciated. Okay, we have a question from Dragonbite. Microsoft is working on Convergence as well. Any hope of being able to port to one of their phones so the hardware for Convergence is already built in? Do you know anything about that?
No, I mean, that's a new question for me. I mean, we currently obviously rely on the hardware support from the Android implementations. So I don't know about moving to a Windows phone. I don't know how that would work. I think it would be, sounds like it would be a lot of work.
Yeah, probably. Somebody on IRC also mentioned that the bootloaders might be locked, so there's
Yeah,
probably a lot of interesting problems to solve first.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point too. I mean, we tend to work with very friendly vendors.
Okay. Follow up to that question: are we going to win the convergence race?
Well, yeah. I mean, we kind of we've been talking about that concept for a while and working toward it. With all the designs for a long time, and now we're getting ready to realize it. And I think because the foundation was there and the design patterns were always intended for it, I think it's going to work as well as it can work, and probably better than some of the other platforms that are kind of coming at it late.
Cool. Sorry, I was just looking at the incoming questions because there's still a few. The fish asks, do you know when scopes will be rotatable and when the Nexus 5 will be officially supported?
So there's a lot of work on scopes right now. So you'll see kind of a facelift for how we manage them coming in the next few months, and that will probably help to answer that question. So that'll become a lot more doable in the future. And then on the Nexus 5, there's no plan to move to officially support that at this point. And I don't know if we will, because we now we're working on devices that come from our partners and supporting those. So there'll be more devices supported officially, but I don't know that there'll be more reference designs.
Okay.
People should know too that we do some developer build versions for things like the BQ. So once those phones are available, they can, if they're looking for something to develop with, the partner phones will be perfectly appropriate for that too.
Okay. Another question from Dragonbite. Any new applications in the works, something that the other phones can't do at this time other than scopes? A possible killer app?
I don't think so. We're open to ideas though.
Maybe there's also a question for Martin. Oh,
I think
sorry.
the good convergence is it's the killer app we're working on right now. But
yeah, I think so too. Going to bring a lot of apps to the phone. And maybe the last question: how's the intense work on the software side going with the efficient use of the hardware? Battery drain is a point where other phones struggle now.
yeah, so people who followed along have noted that when we've had things like battery drain issues, we've addressed them pretty promptly, and now like the BQ phones, I understand we have better battery life than Android running on the same device. So we pay a lot of attention to it, if that's the question, and we're always monitoring it, and we have automated tests for it, and when we see a regression, we try to jump right on it. So it's definitely a focal point.
Cool. Right. I think that's all the questions people had in the audience. Do you have anything you still want to get out there?
No, I just keep it up, and we appreciate all the feedback and all the enthusiasm. I mean, it's great to see, and that the teams working on the software and the devices, they really appreciate it too. It's very motivating to get that kind of good feedback from people who found something they really like about the phone.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks a lot, and keep up the good work.
Indeed.
Nick, anything from you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as always, so that Jose still talks to us after this broadcast, just remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, thumbs up, all that good stuff. Directly below this video, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel for Ubuntu on Air, you'll get lots of good episodes like this. Every Tuesday we have the Ubuntu community team Q&A, and you'll also see some other sporadic events spread throughout the year. Sometimes you'll see George talking about Juju and some of the Ubuntu engineers hosting other on-air events that you can interact with. Yeah, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, all that stuff. You'll stay plugged in. I think that's really about it. Don't forget the upcoming events. UOS is coming up. Actually, I guess it's a couple months out still, so you still have a little time. But the 3rd to the 5th of November, make plans to show up and talk about the next LTS, which is really exciting. That's it.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys. See you.